What up, dudes? It's Gaz, and welcome back to another Warframe video. So I just got off a 9-hour stream of the new war, which we'll be uploading the entire playthrough of sometime soon. It's pretty long. So, we're going to be going over the Riven dispo changes today, and yes, I know, I'm the only person who's a content creator that actually pays attention to these, but it's always interesting to me to see how Rivens are being handled nowadays, and we'll be talking about some changes that were made that, you know, could be important to you, could not be important to you, and we'll talk about the meta of the game as far as these Rivens are concerned, because there's lots of weapons that got no changes at all, which I think it's a big problem with the Riven system in general. It's how there's lots of very underwhelming weapons that are not getting Riven changes, and they could definitely use it. So, before we get into it, make sure you're subbed to the YouTube channel, and we'll be streaming later today on Twitch if you want to come check out, the Hangout sesh, and maybe get some Twitch drops while you're at it. Okay, so Riven dispo changes with Harrow Prime. These Riven dispo changes come out every, 3 months, basically, whenever we get a new Prime frame. We've got Harrow Prime with the Scourge Prime and the Nell Prime. So, it's divided into rifles, shotguns, secondaries, melees, and arcwing guns. And we'll be going over all this. Keep in mind, they seem to never want to change the stats of Sentinel Rivens. So, starting off with rifles here. Brace yourself, Kuva Brahma lovers. JK, the Kuva Brahma didn't get nerfed. The only weapons that got nerfed as far as rifles are concerned are the Kuva Ogress, and we'll talk about that in a second, because that's actually not surprising, and the Shedu got nerfed. I'm surprised by that, because the Shedu just is not as good as the Bavonico nowadays, unfortunately, so I'm not sure why they nerfed the Shedu again. Hopefully the Shedu never gets a Riven nerf ever again, because that is unneeded, and the Shedu needs a little bit of help, honestly. Just because the Sentients are so much easier now, and the Shedu's main gimmick was removing enemy resistances that were like Sentients, and it had viral, you could do gas, corrosive, and stuff like that. But now that corrosive is nerfed, now that gas is nerfed, and now that Sentients are easier to kill, the Shedu is not a very important weapon. And the Kuva Ogress, I'm surprised this was not nerfed more. The Kuva Ogress is honestly the secret meta of this game. And the reason is, if you watch my video on the defense arbitrations, the Kuva Ogress Nightwatch Napalm mod is insanity for destroying arbitration drones instantly. Very, very powerful if you buff it up with things like Smite Infusion, Venom Dose, Eclipse, all that kind of stuff. It does even more damage, and you can plow through waves of arbitrations very quickly. Now, keep in mind, you could do that with the Kuva Tsar, you could do it with the Kuva Tonkor, and the Brahma and all that, but the Ogress having that instant fire effect actually does make it the meta for arbitrations, and honestly, I'd say expect more Kuva Ogress Riven nerfs in the future. The stats you usually go for on a Kuva Ogress Riven are going to be multi-shot and damage, so you're not going to really notice too big of a difference probably with that going to 0.8 from 0.85. It's a very small nerf. But since you're just going for raw damage, maybe you could see a couple hundred damage falling off of your non-crits, because this thing has low crit chance too. The lens getting a Riven buff, going to neutral. We still need a Tenet lens to actually make this thing compete with the Brahma nowadays, because the lens delayed explosion, it's just too slow for the way the game is played. Look at the background gameplay with my Kuva Ogress. Like I just said, the Kuva Ogress is basically the meta. The Kuva Ogress is much faster than the lens and doesn't even have any crit. Who cares if I can't red crit? My Kuva Ogress one-shots level 1700 Exodus infested, okay? And I know that's not like a Grenier or whatever, but that should say a lot. With no crits, I can one-shot over level 1000, okay? With a Riven. The lens needs some help. The Panthera Prime, I actually forgot to make a video on this thing. There will be a video coming out on this thing in the future. The Panthera Prime has gotten so many Riven buffs at this point. It's actually a really decent slash weapon at this point. If you are looking for something that's fun, I'd say the Astilla Prime is probably still better than the Panthera Prime. But it is a saw blade launcher, and it has a Ripper from Dead Space kind of thing too. So, interesting. Sporothrix getting a small Riven buff. If you're trying to go for a multi-shot Riven, just gives you even more multi-shot. If you're trying to go for a crit damage Riven or an overall damage Riven, just more stats there. So sure, Sporothrix will keep getting buffed as it's a 1% crit weapon, and I feel like I'm one of the only people that actually uses it. And I don't even use it that much, to be honest. So they get buffed all the way to 1.5, and I don't think it would change anything. It's still got 1% crit. Stalta, very powerful weapon, getting a Riven buff, sure, I'll take it. You usually want to get an Elemental on your Stalta Riven just because fitting a viral HM build with the fire rate that you need on a Stalta is really, really difficult. So good for the Stalta. I usually try to get bigger damage numbers in that thing. Tenet Envoy had 0.5, it's going to 0.6. So go for the Tenet Envoy. I think I got about 7% more crit chance on my build, so sure. Tenet Flux Rifle, a single target weapon pretty much. Getting a Riven buff. It's still a single target weapon, and they have no real use in this game, as we did not really get any new endgame game modes with the new war. So the old meta is still the same meta as before, so this is just not really maybe for a Demolist you could use it if you really wanted to, but you could still use AoE weapons on Demolist too and kill them very fast. The Tenant Tetra actually getting a sizable Riven buff from 0.7 to 0.85, but unfortunately for the Tenant Tetra, they actually bugged out, I think, energized munitions on it, where you cannot spam 4 grenade shots in a row anymore. Yeah, it's not the best. So the Tenant Tetra could use a little bit of help, just bug fixes wise. But that's a sizable Riven buff. Expect to see some pretty big numbers on your Tenant Tetra builds nowadays. Let me take a quick look at my Tenant Tetra Riven and see what the stats are looking like after this buff, because that is a sizable buff. All right, I'm going to pull up my multi-shot crit chance Tenant Riven, I think so. Let's see what we got here. All right, so Tenant Tetra with a tri-stat with a negative. Minus damage Grenier is pretty sad, but 106% crit chance, 49% fire rate, 76 multi-shot. So we're at 114% crit chance on the primary shot. Secondary shot is the same crit chance. And as far as multi-shot, before Galvanize is stacked up, we're at 2.6. So, yeah, pretty nice. We're at over 100% crit chance with a crit chance Riven. So, you can't really complain about that, to be honest. Let's go over some more stuff here. Now we've got the, finishing off the rifles, we got the Tenora Prime, like, sure, I guess. Now here's what really annoys me and confuses me about these Riven changes. Tenora Prime, sure, from 0.8 to 0.9. Where are weapons like the Severus Prime? Weapons like the Tenora are the Tiburon Prime. These random generic assault rifles that no one's really using and have, like, not the highest Riven stats. Like, what is the difference between a Tiburon Prime and a Tenora Prime as far as they're concerned? Like, I don't get it. Like, there's so many weapons that are off this list that should be on here, getting at least a small buff, you know? Like, I'm going to scroll through my primary list right now. There's just so many on there. I'm like, I forgot this weapon even existed. Not like a Riven's going to save it in the first place, but you see what I'm saying here. Like, Kuva Karak. Where's the Kuva Karak? Kuva Karak has good Rivens, mind you. But, you know, Ambassador. Where's the Ambassador? Where's the Amprex? Where's all this stuff? The Baza Prime. Like the Baza Prime is basically a forgotten gun. The Voltor Prime. There's so many things that are not on this list that should be on here. It's kind of hilarious. And that will be just exacerbated more with the shotgun section here. So going into the shotguns, you only have 4 changes. Keep in mind, there's the weapon, the Strun Prime, just came out. Who even knows the Strun Prime exists? It's just a generic shotgun. It has 0.5 dispo Rivens. The Strun Wraith has, like, ridiculously high Rivens. The Strun Prime should have gotten a Riven buff with this pass and did not get it. I know they like to usually wait like at least over 3 months, but who is actually thinking the Strun Prime was going to be meta? No one. Literally no one. So the normal Archiplasmor, not the Tenant Archiplasmor, gets a small Riven buff. They just need to buff the Tenant one too. Bigger damage numbers on that. Astilla Prime going from 0.8 to 0.95. A big Astilla Prime Riven buff. If you picked up an Astilla Prime Riven from my video, because of my video, or it's because you like it, I call this thing out. It is good. It is very good. It has high enough Rivens now that my Riven for the Astilla Prime has 133% multi-shot, which is pretty nice. I mean, a lot of fire rate, probably too much fire rate at this point. 100% fire rate with 2 stats and a negative, but 133% multi-shot is very high. So interesting there. You could definitely just take that off for even more fire rate, which is almost it's over double the stats of Vigilante Fervor, which is kind of hilarious. So yeah, still a Prime. Pretty decent enough weapon. It's slightly AoE, so good for that. Corinth, probably one of my favorite weapons in the game. Getting a Riven buff. Nice. Not too noticeable when it's only 0.05 like that, but still, I'll take it. Kuva Heck, a weapon I do not like, but is pretty good for killing single targets, if you want to kill a single target, is actually going to get a Riven buff from 0.7 to 0.8. I think it still needs a couple more, and they just need to make single target more important, but since the current meta of the game is, you know, either kill lots of kill hordes of enemies very easily, or kill one enemy very easily. This can at least kill one enemy very easily if you're doing like a disruption or something like that. I don't even run my Riven on the Kuva Heck, to be honest, because the Riven dispo is so low. But let's just take a quick look at what we're working with here. So with a crit chance Riven, I'm trying to remember what the other stat is. Oh, fire rate. So 94% crit chance. This is, like I said in previous videos, the problem with crit chance Rivens for shotguns is that critical deceleration is just so much better than any stat you could ever get for crit chance on a Riven. So we're at 69% crit chance with critical deceleration. We put the crit chance Riven on here. Let's just see what it would look like. We got a 90% crit chance. With 1 or 2 more crit buffs for the Kuva Heck Riven dispo, it will go to 100, and that will be nice. That will be very good for killing a single target. And keep in mind, and I don't think Energized Missions is bugged on this thing, unlike the Tenant Tetra where it is bugged. So you can actually use 4 alt fire shots in a row on the Kuva Heck. I'd still say the Rivens aren't exactly worth running, but maybe to you it would be worth running. So, yeah. let's move on to the rest of these dispo changes, and we'll finish off this video. All right. So let's go over I think that was all the shotguns I did. The Kuva Hex. So, like I said, Strun Prime's missing. There's certain weapons that are just missing. Like I'm surprised that a lot of the stuff is not on here. But for some of these weapons, like the Exorcist and stuff like that, to be actually meta, they need a variant, a Tenant variant, a Kuva variant, etc., etc. So, nothing out of the ordinary there. No nerfs, thankfully. But yeah, going over secondaries, I'm gonna go through these ones pretty quickly because these don't really change much. Axolotl Prime, a forgotten weapon that they need to buff this a lot more. This Axolotl Prime is not exactly meta at all. It's been bad for a while actually, and they should give it honestly a rework. Buff the base stats at this point, because the Rivens ain't going to be helping it anytime soon when you're buffing it by 0.05 every 3 months. And they do this a lot. They buff the Axolotl Prime like every dispo pass, and it still is trash. So, unfortunate. Cannibalist, a very powerful weapon actually, which is mostly single target unfortunately, is getting another Riven buff. I've always said the Cannibalist is Riven buff bait. It insta-kills Grenadier in the Simulacrum like very fast, and it has the grenade toss that can do some really good crits. Yeah, more buffs. My Riven is stash chance, crit damage minus infested, so even more stash chance, even more crit damage. I'll take it. Cannibalist is an underrated weapon, just a little bit annoying to use. Synex getting a buff. This was a really popular Conditioned Overload procer back in the day. I don't use it as much anymore, but some people do still like it. Getting a small Riven buff. Tenant Cycron going from 0.65 to 0.7. Creeping up and up with that Tenant Cycron dispo, going higher than the Kuva Nucor. The Kuva Nucor's Rivens are 0.5, remember, so this has much higher dispo than the Kuva Nucor at this point. So, it's eking up. It's still not going to have as many as much proc potential as the Kuva Nucor due to the microwave status effect of the Kuva Nucor, but this might make some builds for the Tenant Cycron even better. So good for people that like that. The Mara Detron and the Tenant Detron getting Riven buffs. The Tenant Detron getting a big Riven buff from 0.65 to 0.75. And I have been told that the Tenant Detron is actually the best Profit Taker secondary in the entire game. If you get a magnetic roll due to the built-in radiation. If you get magnetic, it's another element there, and then you can have like lots of elements on there, and it has decent enough stats for nuking down the Profit Taker. Let's take a look at my Riven with the buff and see if it is anything to write home about. I have a feeling it's not going to be because I don't have this thing fully maxed out. So 79% multi-shot, 47% fire rate, 155 damage, 50% recoil. I mean, if you have a 60% Tenant Detron, this might make a lot more. You might get more value out of this, but for me, with a 40% Tenant Detron, I'm not really seeing I'm not seeing the sparks fly. So maybe, but good for people that like that weapon. Euphona Prime. When is the last time you thought about the Euphona Prime? Honestly, this weapon is just like it's so outdated. They nerfed shotgun status or changed it rather, so the alt fire is not as good as before. I think they it's not as good as it has no sniper combo. I used to use this for Eidolon sometimes. It's nowhere near as good as like an Eidolon sniper. What do you use this for? It's like an impact focused pistol. I don't see what you use it for, but it's getting a Riven buff, I guess. I seriously forgot this thing existed. I don't use it at all anymore. So yeah, a small Riven buff at that. The Compressor, your Reli's signature pistol. The only good part about that trashy frame, getting more bubbles. My multi-shot bubble Riven will go up even higher. So good for the Compressor. Pandero Prime, still it's a single target weapon. It hits really hard though, so hitting even harder with this small buff to Pandero Prime. Tenant Diplos getting a small Riven buff from 0.55 to 0.6. It still has that annoying aim down sight thing that I wish they just removed, but whatever. Tenant Spear-X, basically a Tenant Seer, or like a Corpus Seer, getting a Riven buff. I have a Riven for the Tenant Spear-X, but I still don't use the weapon, so sure. Zaki Prime getting a buff to neutral. Whatever. The Zymos, hilariously getting a Riven buff. Remember, this thing is like one of those ridiculous weapons that has like weird crit calculations. Sure, Riven's going even higher. My Riven for the Zymos is probably like stupid high multi-shot and damage at this point. So yeah, if you like the Zymos, I feel like it might get another Riven buff, honestly, at this point. Yeah, my Riven for the Zymos has 139% multi-shot now. Like, wow. That's a lot. All right, going to our melees. There's really not much to write home about here, besides the Glaive Prime got nerfed again. And honestly, I could see it getting at least one more nerf before they stop nerfing it for good. If you are an initial combo Glaive Riven holder, I'm sorry. I hope that you would... I'm sorry. Trust me, I'm there with you. I thought I saved the day when I had initial combo. I used like Corrupt Charge, but now you get that Corrupt Charge maxed out and your Riven to get any value out of it. So initial combo Rivens are pretty much in the grave now for the Glaive Prime, unfortunately. but it is what it is. It's like the only weapon that got nerfed. As far as buffs, Dark Split Sword, Halakar Wraith, Legion, Pulmonars, which, who even uses the Pulmonars? Tenet Agendus, and the Tenet Execs. That's the Sword and Shield and the, and the Great Sword. So those are getting buffs. Those weapons aren't extremely crazy, to be honest, but sure. Vassalot getting a Riven buff. That's nice for like attack speed Riven to make it so you strip armor faster. Vitrica getting a buff, and the Volnus Prime getting a big buff. So the Volnus Prime, it's almost, the Rivens are almost slottable now. So actually, they're neutral, so they probably should be slottable now. Getting your range, getting your crit damage, etc., etc. Maybe even plus slash to proc more slash. On Archwing guns, it's just hilarious how many weapons are not on this list that should be. Like, we're getting a buff to the normal Grattler and the Kuva Grattler. Kuva Grattler's pretty good. I use it for the new war. Larkspur and Morga. There's so many weapons not on here. Like, where are all these Archwing guns that no one uses that are just trash? Like, Singus. I just named a random one off the top of my head. Like, they used to be good for Railjack, but when's the last time you used an Archwing gun in Railjack, right? So, there's just... I feel like this Riven, like, their little Riven number picking thing needs to change. There's so many useless weapons that... Not even a Riven buff would save them, but at least a Riven buff would make people potentially more interested in them. Strun Prime is the best example. Did they forget the Strun Prime existed? The Magnus Prime too. Did they forget the Magnus Prime existed? That the Euphona Prime is worse than Magnus Prime, probably just because how slow the fire rate is. But the Magnus Prime is 0.5 dispo. So, I don't know. They need to change something. They need to do more manual reviews. I don't know what the people that choose these numbers are doing with their day, but it should not take that long to find numbers for these weapons. Like, I don't understand why it's so hard to figure this out. To me, as someone that has been paying attention to these Riven changes for years and years, it feels like the quality is getting worse and worse with these changes. Like, when is it just the end of like, okay, well, we're going to just have the community do it. Have the community pick these numbers. Like, we'll sign an NDA or something, and we'll help you out, make the game more fun. Or are you just too proud of your random 0.5 dispo Strun Prime that no one is using? Maybe you're just proud of that, so... Either way, guys, hopefully this was helpful to you. As far as weapons that didn't get nerfed, like, of course, like, you know, there's our Zars that didn't get nerfed, the Brahmas, all that. The Ogres, I'd say if you don't have an Ogress Riven and you want to farm defense Arby's, since there's nothing really to do after the new war, go get an Ogress Riven. Try to roll for multi-shot and damage, like minus zoom, and you can start blowing stuff away. So, I'll see you guys in the next video. Rip Glaive Rivens, they might get nerfed one more time, to be honest, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for all the support. Peace.